So I'm going to ask you today to look at two pieces of literary criticism, and then on the swimmer, and I'm going to go over a third piece with you. So just briefly, this first piece is from The Guardian. It's a pretty accessible article, and it makes a connection between John Cheever and F. Scott Fitzgerald. It talks about the disillusionment and denial and the lust and greed of materialism that infiltrates the story and makes a connection between the 1920s lost generation and this 1960s era. They're both post-war eras, and they're pursuing this question of what is significant and what matters in a world that has really gone off the deep end into alcohol and abandonment of responsibility and lots of questions of what matters and why. So that's the first article that I want you to look at. And then the second one is called Cheever's Dark Night of the Soul, The Failed Quest of the Nettie Merrill. What this one is going to be looking at is a lot more in depth at what I was talking about in the previous example with making this story an epic journey. And so as we go through this, we note that his journey is very familiar with the Grail quest type of an epic. In other words, there is something that this character is after, whether it be like in the Odyssey, he's trying to get home from war, or whether there's the pursuit of this object that's going to save the kingdom, whatever it might be. He has a quest in mind, and what we note as we go through this particular article is that when he's going on this quest through the very limited neighborhood of his suburban reality, these grail symbols or the pursuit is going to be for selfish enjoyment. And this really shows how far suburbanites have strayed from the original spiritual values espoused in the Grail myth. Generally, heroes would go on a quest for the service of others, and in this case, Nettie was going on a quest just for the heck of it, for fun, because I have nothing better to do, and for his own um, merit and notoriety. So he is a, quote, legendary figure. He's a man with a destiny, and he dives headfirst into this journey of inexplicable contempt. So he possesses the characteristics of the Grail hero, and this is it. The term that critics use is virility, meaning that they're virile. They are full of life. They're agile. They're willing to um, plow themselves into a pursuit regardless of the consequences. And so, like other heroes, he set off on a perilous quest to reach his home by the water. Cheever implies then the essentially selfish nature of Nettie's quest. He does not act for community, but for self, and his ultimate goal is purely egocentric. Um, and so, separating from his social group, he begins the initial phase of his journey by passing through a boundary. There's a hedge that he has to go under, and he sets out by an uncommon route. He has to pass over a thorny hedge. Along the road of trials, he encounters several obstacles. The unpleasantries range from the gravel that cut his feet to bartenders who snub him and hostesses who insult him. And typically, the Grail hero would encounter things that were much more heroic in feat. But ultimately, that is what Cheever is saying. This is what our world has been reduced to. This is what heroism has been reduced to, a selfish pursuit of your own satisfaction of comfort, of pleasure. And that's the most noble cause that we can confront. And so, therefore, the worst we can see is, oh, I'm snubbed by somebody, or oh, I don't get offered a drink. It's pathetic what the epic journey in our contemporary society has been reduced to. And so he goes on. During the hero's journey, I'm going to skip ahead for just a bit. During his quest, Ned is aided by a traditional helper. So along the way of the journey, there should be helpers. And usually Carl Jung labeled it the old man. This figure usually appears when the hero is hopeless and desperate. And in the midst of his most difficult passage, Ned He's close to naked. He's on the side of the road, Route 424. He's standing in the midst of beer cans and rags and blowout patches. And he's attacked with jeers and beer cans. And finally, an old man let him cross to the middle of the road. And so, having firmly implanted this notion, the hero needs to inquire into the nature of the Grail. What is the purpose of my quest? But Ned fails to ask that question. He just keeps moving and moving and moving. He's not asking questions. There's no introspection. He has a he has a predilection for not thinking. So, in other words, it's, I don't know, I don't care. There's an apathy to the 1960s, of people just doing what society does, going with the flow. Um, and so, again, there's some other funny characters we meet along the way. There's the naked communists, that are sitting by their pool, and they try to help him. They try to force him to look at the truth of his life by asking him about questions and bringing up his misfortunes, but he still refuses to see them. Um, and then, furthermore, um, there's another Grail figure, the Temptress, which is his old mistress. The Temptress is supposed to point out the selfish nature of the Grail quest and kind of purify him, but he still can't grasp the immature, selfish nature of his quest, and so he fails the test of the Temptress. And then at the end, if he arrives at the Grail Castle and if he is worthy, then he is granted admittance. And when he gets home, he is stooped, he is hobbled, he arrives at his house, which is the goal, and it's empty. And so Cheever is showing us that Ned got caught up in the modern myth of mammonism, in the cult of youth, and he is an unworthy quester. So this is just the pursuit of money and wealth and pleasure, instead of something that has a higher spiritual worth or value. So ultimately, he uses the Grail myth to reveal the ironic gap between a hero's selfish search for his own youth, as well as materialism, and the traditional Grail hero's selfless, community-serving quest. So Ned, the modern man, has lost his spiritual bearings, and the life-saving waters are used solely for pleasurable swim. And so that is the culmination of society. Isn't that lovely?